Oh boy, this intro is gonna be complicated and there's no way that I'm not gonna mess it up, but I won't get it right anyway, so let's just try it, because I have to clarify something that I said in my preview last week. Because what I said is that the Redmi Note that I have here from China is what in India is the Redmi 5 Plus, but that wording was wrong, because what I meant is that what in India is the Redmi Note 5 is what in China is the Redmi 5 Plus. So, for the last time, and I hope I will get this right, this is the Chinese Redmi Note 5. That one is very extremely similar to the Redmi Note 5 Pro in India, but it's not the same, because from what I heard, this one, the Chinese version, actually has a better main camera, but therefore a little bit of a weaker front camera. So I hope all confusion is done. In my opinion, this is the best possible version you can get, but it's still, after all, very comparable to the one that you get in India. If you have no other chance to get that, get that. But if you should, that's something we are going to find out in this review. And first of all, talk about the design. Let's compare with the OnePlus 5T. Not that they are in the same price range, but just so you can see that how tall of a device is. And I always said that the 5T is already quite a tall device, because even though we have this 2x1 display, the bezels are still quite huge, as you can see. So you have still a lot of bezels at the top and bottom. And therefore this device is very tall. This is one of the tallest phones that I've ever used. Now real quick with the XZ2 that I just got today. So you can see obviously noticeably taller, but also wider, but not thicker. The XZ2 is though just 5.7 inches. But let's talk about the good things about the design. It feels very good. There is a little bit of creak if I really try to bend it in my band test, but otherwise it feels very solid. But I will just have to knock a half star off. But button placement is nice. They click better than ever. There's not so much of a audio feedback, but a nice tactile feedback. I like that. Fingerprint reader, one of the better ones, especially for a mid-ranger. This is very good. And I would actually like to see some of these in some flagships. The camera does protrude quite heavily, in case you like that or not. Even though I would say if you use it in a case, which was actually provided, a quite nice one, I just don't have it here in a moment, should not be bothering you. Now then we have the IR blaster and the microphone, SIM card tray and SD card tray. USB type, no, not C, but still micro USB. I actually heard that there is a non-band 20 version coming with type C. I'm not quite sure about all the confusion that they started with this device, so definitely not the smartest idea. Then the speaker, mic again, headphone jack, notification LED just in white, camera of course, and capacitive buttons. What I like is that the front is flat, but there is a nice smooth transition, as well as to the sides. Everything is curved nicely, the back though flat, and in and feel is very nice, and you can still actually quite nicely use it, but definitely don't expect to reach the upper top. Is there a lower top? I don't know. Okay, display. I gotta say, I'm not completely convinced about it. Brightness is okay with about 500 lux, but the issue is still contrast in colors. Why? If I use increased contrast, I can't change the color temperature because it's noticeably too cool. If I set it to automatic contrast, then I can, but automatic contrast will boost the brightness and also the contrast in very harsh lighting situations, and then it just feels completely off. So the only way I would say still, if you want something a little bit warmer, go for standard, but then colors are a little more muted or just not quite saturated. Otherwise, I would still stick with increased contrast. But even then, I would have to say that I'm not fully happy with this display, because at some certain colors, at sometimes, for some reason, and I don't know why, the colors feel a little bit pale, and like there is a little bit of a lack of contrast, and it feels kind of too bright, even though you didn't set the brightness too high. And then like there is a little bit of a kind of veil over it, which is something that I'm not the biggest fan of. But otherwise, it's a fine display. Colors are nice. Of course, there is some IPS glow, which is obvious. Viewing angles are mostly okay, but it does dim a little bit. But that's the only thing. But it is totally fine display. But for some reason, I would have expected a little bit something nicer. I definitely prefer the one of the Nokia 6 2018. But what about the speaker? Let's actually get into that one. Bah. Yes, absolutely fine. Volume is really nice. It's actually quite a loud one, and it doesn't sound super cheap or something like that. It's not super high quality. It's actually quite rich, but there is a little bit of some low quality grain there. Not a lot, but it's there. It's still better than something, for example, like on an LG V30, and that's why it gets 4 stars instead of 3.5. So it's fully satisfying. Even better though, the headphone jack in that regard, because it's very loud, and in the settings you have options for headphone presets, equalizer and all that. So yeah, actually one of the better ones. Now about performance, this is the big thing that I complained about the first hour that I had this phone, because it was absolute crap. I then just made a factory reset and then things were fine, because now I have to say I am fully pleased with this Snapdragon 636. And I think everyone who makes a mid-range phone in 2018 and doesn't use this chip makes something wrong, because as you can see, super battery smooth, way more consistent than the 630 was, and even than the 625, which I actually think was better than the 630. But super nice. Pretty much no lag at all. It's very battery smooth, very consistent, which is nice to see. As you can see, responsive. Actually, noticeably faster app loading times compared to what we've seen before. Also multitasking. This is actually the 6GB version. Absolutely, totally fine. Browsing, obviously, smooth. So, yes, this is a great chip. It's not quite on a 660 level, but definitely noticeably better than what the 630 and everything before that. So I'm super pleased with that, and that one, super nice. If you don't need a flagship performance, but want to get quite close, but not quite as close with the 660, this one is the one to go for. Now battery life, I actually did not check the full charge, but I would expect it since there is no quick charge available. But that also kind of varies from version to version, and I have a Chinese power adapter and with an adapter, so I don't know, quite sure, but I would expect it to be 2.5 hours. There is supposed to be a version though with quick charge. I have no idea. I completely lost track of all the versions that will come out or are already out or whatever. But the battery life, absolutely great. I would say 8 hours on mobile data, if not even 9 hours, which already sounds impressive. 10 hours plus, if not 11 hours on Wi-Fi. And over the course of 2 days, I got 7.5 hours. This is impressive. It is better than the Redmi 5 Plus was, even though I did not expect that. But maybe it is, after all, a little bit more efficient, or my use changed slightly. But it's at least on par with the Redmi 5 Plus. But I think it actually is a little bit better. And especially standby drain was really, really good. But that's a thing of Xiaomi device that I've experienced on my own ones with the Note 3 and the Mi 6, that it can change after a while, so I'm a little bit hesitant to say great, but so far it is very good. So software, I actually don't really want to cover anything here, because yes, still no app drawer. Yes, still quite ugly with the notification shade, but theming engine definitely there, and a quite good one, a lot of themes available, and that one should cover it all. Now about the version, when I did my factory reset, I actually also switched to the developer Chinese ROM, so I'm on that. As you can see, MIUI 98329. So not but this is not the global one yet. There is a global one, but I would have had to unlock for that, so I did not do that. But in terms of features, it's pretty much exactly the same. Nothing really changed. You can of course change the button layout a little bit. You have better in performance. That's of course dual window mode, notification shade options are there for the speed. A ton of smaller adjustments. The good thing about Xiaomi devices is that you get an update support for very long, but the actual version change needs quite long. But the good thing is we are already at, this is already running 8.1, but I don't think P will come really soon, because that's where they take a little bit more time, because it is quite a, I won't say heavy UI, but a lot of a feature-rich UI, because I don't think it really makes an impact on the performance, because I've used already, for example, the A1 back then, with Android 1 and the X5, which is, or the 5X, which was the same phone with EMUI, no real difference in terms of performance. So I like what they are doing with the software. It's not for everyone, but personally, if you get used to that, not though on the Chinese one. You should definitely switch to the global one, or to the maybe Xiaomi EU ROM, because there are some quirks on this one here. Camera. The exact same as on any other phone. So you can switch between the modes here. You still have no direct toggle for HDR, but you have to actually still press and then kind of choose whatever you want. Not my personal first choice, but it's okay. It features enough, but the quality is important. So let's check that. Selfie cam looks really nice, and my battery just died off my mouse. So here we are. Okay, so selfies look good in normal lighting situations, but as you can see, the white balance and especially the exposure is sometimes a little bit off. If they would fix that a little bit more, because in bright sunlight, and as you can see, sometimes it looks completely pale, totally overexposed. If they fix that, it would be even better. But with good lighting situations, especially since the sharpness is fine, it's nice. But something like the Nokia 6 2018, that is quite a similar competitor, I would have to say, pictures just look more natural for some reason, and it's hard to explain exactly why, but also a little bit sharp in general. Inside also pretty much the same. If it gets it right, it looks good. If not, not, but there are better ones out there. Low light capabilities are okay. They did improve a little bit over the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus. The selfie camera maybe not that much, but as you can see here, in good lighting situations, in a normal lit room, it's okay. But yeah, definitely better ones out there, as you can see. Outside, when we switch to that now, you can see this picture, for example, was with not that much light, and this one was with a lot more. And the more light you get, for some reason, the colors look a little bit more natural, or less natural, because this is without, and this, for example, now with. So keep that in mind. But otherwise, it's a nice camera. It did improve also a little bit over the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus, but actually not enough to give it a half star or even more of that. I personally still think that something like a Nokia 6, which is very comparable, but not the Zeiss version, seems to produce slightly sharper, more natural pictures. But autofocus was very stable actually, and everything else was fine. So it's a good camera. For this price, for what this phone is, it absolutely gets the job done. But I would wish for some little bit more clarity, sharpness or something like that, but maybe that's just me. Now let's check video. There is no 4K yet, but they already announced that with an upcoming update it will come, but for now it's 1080p. It looks fine. The stabilization is the big thing here. That's why it easily gets half a star more than compared to the Redmi 5 Plus. The stabilization, EIS though, not an optical one, works really good. It actually isn't totally artificial and it doesn't seem too unnatural, but it is super nice and smooth. Quality, even on 1080p, seems actually fine. Bitrate looks good. Now about the front-facing cam, no real improvement here. I still think that the front-facing video is not good. It's kind of over-sharpened here because this looks completely wrong, but then it's kind of blurry at the same time, overexposing. Not happy with that one, not at all. And then, for example, here once again, or even indoors, it's, oh, that was the wrong one. Even indoors, just not great. Now the sound is okay, but they still don't really use the highest end microphone, so it sounds a little bit tinny, but yeah, loud enough, clear enough. Yeah, it gets the job done. I guess you can hear that I'm not fully convinced of the cam. I actually, after my preview, thought a little bit more about it, but in better lighting situations, it did not really improve what I expected it to. But let's get to the conclusion, to the rating. You can see those. And if you would compare them to the Xiaomi Redmi Note 5 Plus, you won't actually see that much of a difference than what I've seen. Battery life got a little bit more, but I gave it half a star more just because back then the rating was completely new, maybe misjudged a little bit, but so 5 stars, absolutely. And then the rest did not really improve that much because after all it is the same basic phone. It just changed the camera a little bit, but other than that it's the Redmi 5 Plus, which leads me actually kind of to my conclusion. If you don't really care about the improvement of camera and you don't need better performance or battery life, you can, if noticeably cheaper, get the Redmi 5 Plus. No issues here. But this will be a little bit more future-proof, especially if you maybe get even the 6GB version, which I think is not the sweet spot for the price, because the 4GB, 64GB version is what I would recommend. The 3GB, not quite future-proof enough anymore, but the 636 is noticeably better in performance. Also, especially for games, there was a significant improvement here in terms of GPU performance. It's even more efficient, it seems. It didn't really get warm at all. Performs top. Display is the same. Speaker is the same. Camera a little bit better, but actually not as much as I expected it to be. Doesn't change one fact though. This phone at 230 euros is still great with import costs and everything, but that's why it also just got 4 stars instead of 4.5 stars for the value, because this phone will drop very quickly in terms of price, and I know that every time it happens, whenever I release my review quickly after the release, I say, well, isn't it great? But like a month later, it drops heavily. And I would expect this to be at the sweet spot configuration of 4 and 64GB at 160, I would say. I'm pretty sure it will get to that point because the Redmi 5 Plus already is sometimes available at 130, 150. So this should be like 30 bucks, maybe more. If the difference is like 50 bucks, I would still go for this one just because of the more future-proof SoC. It is noticeably better after all. And can I recommend it? Yeah, obviously I can. And I would actually go that far as I say, once the price is below 200, especially significantly below 200, this is the best budget phone you can get, pretty much. Of course, availability, import costs, and so on. Even though by now, at least in Europe, we can get these phones directly, almost directly by now. So I think this will sell like hotcakes. It is a legitimate successor to the Redmi Note 4. But if you have the 4 already, you don't need to upgrade, because it is a jump up, but maybe not significant enough. But if you don't have something like that, if you have something lower than something like a Redmi Note 4, definitely go for this one. Or check the competition. Okay, until next time. 15 minutes. That was quick. I don't know why. Bye.